morning, Victory. Good morning. And it's great to have everyone with us here today, joining us here. If you're watching online and also in Elmira, I hope this is a formative day and a formative series for you guys as we sort of continue through our Room to Breathe series. Pastor Paul has talked the last couple weeks about what does it look like to have this sort of room to breathe, this margin in our family lives. He talked about what does it mean to count our days and make sure our days matter. And today we're going to continue with a topic that I think if we're honest, we've all dealt with, right? It's a fight starter in a lot of things, right? In marriages, they say this is one of the number one relationship fight causers. And so we're going to talk today a little bit about money. The title, if you look in there, is Money Matters. And depending on where you are in life, you may have heard that and been like, money matters, all right? Or you may have just read that and been like, oh, money matters. And so it's going to be a little bit of both. But we've all probably had these moments in life when we feel constricted, right? We feel as if the world has come in around us. We feel that the breath is actually being squeezed out of our bodies, there's so much pressure. There's just so much going on that the stress and the worry of life has taken everything out of us. I know what this feels like, and one particular time that I felt it, as most of you know, I did college ministry for about 10 years. I was a director of spiritual formation at Ohio Christian University. I pastored a church there on campus, and we did something at the end of every semester called midnight breakfast, right? It's the most college thing I've ever heard of. We're like, hey, it's midnight, what should we do? Eat, right? And so, yeah, we're like, let's do it. And so we would bring in all of the students. We as a staff would actually serve them. And throughout the years, this sort of tradition came up. And the tradition was always at some point during, somebody would drop something, a tray, a plate, a bowl, whatever. But most times a tray. And when someone would drop their tray, immediately everyone would yell, fumble! And then one guy would dive on it, and then the rest of the people would just start diving on him. Yeah, mostly freshman boys, right? Because, freshmen, right? And so what would happen is eventually the pile would grow and grow and grow, and it became this pile of just like smelly freshman boy mixed with French toast, all right? That was kind of, well, what they eventually started doing, they actually took a tray, kind of drew a football on it, wrote the fumble tray on it, and they would come up to different staff members, drop the tray in front of them and say, fumble, and see what would happen. Eventually, a couple years into my tenure, it became my turn. So they come to me, they drop the tray in front of me, they yell, fumble! And I make, up to that point, was the worst mistake of my life. I dive on the tray. In their excitement, they then dive on me. First 1, then 2, then 4, then 8, then 80. And more are coming, right? And I can feel slowly the weight and the pressure and the smell of freshman boy. And I realize this is how I die. This is it. Like, what a horrible ending to my life. How did he die? A pile-on of freshman boy and French toast, right? Like that was, and I could just feel this. I could feel literally the breath being pushed out of my lungs. And in a last-ditch effort, with everything inside of me, with the breath that is left, I scream out, I can't breathe. And they didn't care. They didn't care at all, right? And I was waiting for that moment, right? That moment that you hear about in stories where like a 13-year-old boy is in a car crash. He gets this spike of adrenaline, like lifts the car. Like, I'm just praying, Lord, just make it come. Like, give me something, right? And then I'm just like, Lord, let me pass out. If not from the breath, from the smell. God, just do something, right? But I was just at this place where the pressure had built up upon me to the point that I couldn't breathe. And I just wanted a little room. A little space in my life away from them. But I think if we're honest, we've all felt like that at some point. We've all had these moments in life where we feel pressured, where we feel squeezed, where we don't feel that we have the room that we need to breathe, that we don't have that margin in our life if something goes wrong or if we want something to go right, to allow us to engage. And what happens is when we're at that place, it changes us. We start to act in ways we normally wouldn't act. We do things we normally wouldn't do. We say things in ways that we normally wouldn't. It starts to affect us emotionally. It starts to affect us psychologically. Eventually going to affect us physically and spiritually. And so when we talk about money, I know sometimes that's a touchy topic. But the fact is, Jesus talks consistently about money. He tells us that where our treasure is, our heart is there also. That it shows us what we value. Where we put our money shows us what we value. And it's sort of like the consistent trope about preachers that are up here asking for your money. And listen, let's be honest, we've seen that. As people, as churches, as Christians, as non-church, we've seen that happen when people start using the platform or using the church as a way for financial gain. That's not what we're talking about. The reason that we talk about money and victory is twofold. One is because Jesus talks about it, the Bible talks about it, and something that we think is important. And two is because it is something that can cripple us as people if we're not careful. That the way we spend our money, the way we use our money, the value that we put on our money, it can stop us from doing the things that we're supposed to do, that we want to do, that God wants us to do. And so we come to a place in life where we have to decide whether we're going to use money or we're going to allow money to use us, whether we're going to use things and love people or we're going to love things and use people. Those are basically our two options. And so the story that we're going to talk about today is maybe not a story that we generally use when we think about money, but I think it has a clear theme in it that explains this for us. It's in the Gospel of Mark. Jesus is telling a parable. And in the parable, he talks about a sower who's taking seed and scattering it on the ground. And the seed goes to a couple places. Some of it falls by the road and a bird comes and snatches it up. Some of it goes on rocky ground, so it digs in quick and grows, but because it doesn't have roots, when the sun comes out, it dies. Some of it gets taken by vines and by weeds, and it gets the life strangled out of it. Some of it grows and produces a harvest. And so after the story and they're walking away, the disciples ask Jesus, they go, what does this mean? And I love the Gospel of Mark for this reason. In the Gospel of Mark, the disciples look like idiots all the time. Like that's just part of his theme. It's true. Watch, go through and read the Gospel of Mark and look how often the disciples just look like this bundling fools that have no clue what's going on. Actually, in my New Testament class in college, we had to have themes in each of the Gospels. And one of the things I wrote was, under Mark, I put dumb disciples, right? They just don't get it. They don't get who Jesus is. They don't get his message. They don't get what he's doing. So Jesus sounds a little exasperated with them. They ask him this question, and this is his response. Then Jesus tells them, don't you understand this parable? How then will you understand any parable, right? Like, he's had enough. The farmer sows the word or the gospel. Some people are like seed along the path. When the word is sown, as soon as they hear it, Satan comes and he takes it away. Others, like seed sown on rocky places, hear the word at once and receive it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes, they quickly fall away. Still others, like seed sown among thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Yet others, like seed sown on good soil, hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop, some 30, some 60, some 100 times what was sown. So he said there's different groups, right? The first group, the seed gets thrown on and Satan comes, swoops, takes it away quickly. Other seed falls on shallow soil where there's a lot of rocks. And maybe you've met people that sort of have come to church and gotten excited, or something happens and it's sort of this emotional response, but they don't dig their roots deeply. And once trouble comes, they get blown away. The third group is the group that we're going to focus on today. He says some of them, when they get the gospel, when the word comes to them, it says, still others, like a seed sown among thorns, hear the word, what stops them? The worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desire for other things come in and choke it out. Listen, there's nothing wrong with money, right? The fact of the matter is, we don't really care about money, right? You guys, some of you heard that and were like, speak for yourself, sir. We don't. Money itself really doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter to us. Those little pieces of paper, those little coins, they themselves are neutral. They are worth nothing truly. What we like is what money brings to us, what it can do for us. The value that it makes us look like, the value that it gives us out in society, and the stuff that we can get from it. It's not really the money, it's the stuff, right? The money is just a means to an end. And so money itself is not the problem. The problem is what comes with it. The problem is what happens, how we use it, why we use it, what we allow it to do to us. That's the real question. Like I said earlier, right? The money is one of the number one fight causers in marriages. But generally it's just a symptom, right? If you've talked to couples when we're having fights, there's sort of the issue, that's the spoken issue, and then there's always like the issue behind the issue, right? And then really, generally there's like the issue behind that issue, and that's the real sort of cause of what's going on. Money is an argument causer because it's easy to talk about, it's easy to touch and take. We know what that looks like. But the reality is there's a lot of stuff behind that's causing our troubles. Sharon and I, you guys have heard me say this before, we've been married for 9 years, happily married for 7.5. That's just where we're at. We've had some great years and we've had some rough years. And early on in our marriage was when one of our roughest times was happening. Shara wasn't happy and I didn't understand why. In my mind, I was like, she's married to me. Like, what's not to like about this? What is going on? Like, as most young, dumb, married males think, I should be enough. You see, Shara had come from Idaho. If you've ever been to Idaho, it's okay, I guess, if you like picturesque mountains and rivers and snow-covered trees and all that junk. We were living in Ohio, where we have cornfields and cow pastures. And the fact is, once you've seen one corn stalk, you've seen them all. And Sharon had enough of cornfields and cow pastures. She wanted some elevation change. She wanted some beauty. I didn't get that. Sharon had grown up in a large family. She had a large, loving family that supported and gathered around one another. I had grown up with just me and my little sister. I didn't really understand the dynamics of a larger family and how much it meant to her. So she felt that she was alone out in a cornfield, unhappy with me. All I knew was that she wasn't happy. But I also knew that there were things that seemed to make her happy. When we would decorate the house, she would be happy. When she would get new things, she would be happy. And so what I decided was the way to make her happy was to buy her stuff. So I would go. We'd go to a store and she'd say, "Oh, look at that." And I'd buy it for her. We got a bedroom suite and we got furniture and we just trips to play. I just kept, and eventually what happened is I ran out of money. I had no monies left. And then I learned that you don't have to have money to buy things. You don't. You just have to have this little magical plastic card. It's amazing. You walk into a store and you go, "How much is that?" And they tell you. And then you say, I have no money, but I have this. And they go, would you like anything else? It's unbelievable. And so we would go in and I would go, yes, I would. I'll take two. And and then, like anything else, if one is good, two is better. So then I got a couple of those little plastic magic things floating around all over the place. And I just kept buying and buying, and it worked little bits at a time. We get a new chair, Shara would be happy for a while. We get a painting to put on the wall, she'd be happy for a while. And what I thought is that if I just kept buying her stuff, everything was gonna be fine. But let me tell you what happened. Shara would go to sleep at night, and I would lie awake because the people that owned that card now owned me. And they kept sending me papers telling me I had to pay them for things, which didn't make any sense because if I had the money to pay them, I would have paid for the stuff on my own. And I would lay awake in bed, freaking out. Because see, I was working as a pastor of a small church while helping at a school. My wife was attending school. We were paying part of her loans, as well as the house, as well as food, because I like to eat. And then on top of that, all the stuff. And I would lay in bed sweating, trying to figure out where I was going to find enough money and how much blood I had to donate to fix this problem. You know what it did? It changed me. It changed me as a person. It changed the way I responded. It changed the way I act. I became short. I became angry for things that normally wouldn't bother me. Shara would say something totally innocuous, and I would snap at her because I was under so much pressure, and I was under so much stress, and I was so angry, and I was so frustrated, and I was so worried that I was becoming someone I didn't want to be. And this all kind of came to a head at a point when Shara and I had a discussion. Married couples don't have fights when they're Christians. They have discussions. We were having a loud discussion. Okay, I was being loud. Shara was being Shara, which is not loud. I'm a loud person naturally. I know this is surprising for those of you that have heard me preach. Okay, what you guys don't know is I've toned it down to like a 4 for you. Okay, Sunday mornings I'm at a 4. Normal Aaron is at a 6 to 7. Discussion Aaron's like an 8, which from what I'm told for normal people is like a 12. You didn't even know a 1 to 10 scale could go to 12, but apparently it does. So we're having this discussion and I'm being loud for no reason at all. And she says something. It wasn't even a big deal, but it annoyed me. And so I snapped back and finally she said, "What's wrong with you?" And it just broke open. I said, "You're not happy and I'm not happy and I keep trying to make you happy and I'm buying all this stuff and we don't have any money and I don't know how we're gonna eat and they're gonna turn off our electric and we're not gonna be able to afford this house and I've got all these cards, I don't know what to do with the cards." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I bought you all this stuff to make you happy." And she said, "I never asked for it." I said, "You kind of did. We walked in a store and you would smile at something." That looked happy to me. I wanted to continue that happiness. She's like, "I didn't ask." I said, "It doesn't matter." And so then we started talking about the actual issue, because the issue wasn't the money. See, we slowly worked our way back to what we realized the issue was trust. You see, my biggest fear is that you're gonna like stage Aaron. But once the funny jokes and the biblical insights are gone and real life starts, you're not gonna like real life Aaron. And see, every relationship before her had proved that to me. Because every time times got tough and it wasn't fun anymore, they left. And eventually I got to a place where I thought that she was gonna leave. And I told her that. I said, "Babe, I'm afraid if you're not happy and we're not having fun, you're not gonna be here anymore." And see, it wasn't just a lack of trust for her, it was a lack of trust of God. You see, I had said that I believed God brought us together and that I believed that God was gonna be the glue that held our marriage together, but I was acting like debt was going to be the glue to hold our marriage together. I didn't trust the promise of God when he said he was going to take care of us. I didn't trust that when Jesus said, look at the sparrow and how free they are, and look at the lily of the valley and how I take care of them. Don't you think I'm going to take care of you? I didn't believe that. I mean, I believed it, right? We sing it and we say it. Can we be honest today? Are we allowed to be honest in church? I don't know if that's allowed. Yeah. We talk like we do, but we often live like we don't. And that's where I was. And the worries of life had overwhelmed me to the point that I didn't even know how to trust. So while money is the symptom, down here, what's really happening, first thing is a lack of trust. A lack of trust of the people around us, a lack of trust of God. We don't trust that he's actually going to take care of us. We don't trust that he actually is the source of our joy. So we find other sources of our joy, and we have to pay for those. And we pay for those, oftentimes we use money we don't have. We work in a nightmare American dream, right? You've heard me say it before. We work at a job that we hate to buy stuff we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And we're in the rat race, and the pressure has so built up that we don't know what to do. And we've hit our ceiling. We've hit our capacity. We don't know how to respond. And so what happens is we grab for more control. We try to do more. We try to work harder. We spend more money. We get more stuff. We think that it's going to help us, and it doesn't. And I didn't trust that God was going to take care of Sharon and I, and I didn't trust that God was going to make it better, so I tried to make it better on my own. And we see this happening in different stories in the Bible over and over and over again. If you look in your notes, I have 2 references of scripture that you can look up later. One is the garden with Eve, and the other is Jesus when he's being tempted by Satan. And what's interesting is both of those passages and this one tell a very similar story about how we are tempted in life. When Eve's talking to the serpent's first question is, did God really say that? Does he really not want you to do this? Immediately breaking the trust for Eve. When Satan's talking to Jesus, he takes him up, and he says, why don't you throw yourself over this cliff? Won't God protect you? Won't God help you? Don't you trust him? And in this story, the worries of life, the anxieties, the fears, the lack of trust of God and ourselves and others bring us to a place that we start making poor choices everywhere, especially in our finances. Second one is a desire for pleasure. Now listen, there's nothing wrong with pleasure. All right, listen, do not leave this place and say, Pastor Aaron said the only way we can be happy is to be miserable. That's what I heard. That's what I heard. He just said, he said we can't enjoy anything. We just got to hate life. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. We were made. God created us to enjoy unnecessary pleasure. The problem is when we desire that pleasure more than we desire anything else, and we start to make horrible choices to get there. When we are so addicted to that feeling of pleasure that nothing else matters. We see it in the Garden of Eden. The serpent looks at Eve and says, look at the apple. Doesn't it look good to eat? Doesn't it look pleasurable? We see it in the temptation of Jesus. Satan says, look, you're hungry. You haven't eaten in a long time. Why don't you take these stones and make them into bread? If he really wanted to tempt Jesus or me, he would have said, make it into like a McRib, right? Like, that's what I hear when I hear that story. And what does it say in this passage? These things are the anxiety of life, the worries of life, the lack of trust constricts us. What else constricts us? The desires for the world, for stuff. What we think and what we've been told and what we believe is that as long as we can raise our standard of living, it's also going to raise our quality of life. And so how do we raise this? Make more, work harder, buy more stuff. If you don't have the money, go in debt to do it. That's what we've been told. And whether we say we believe it or not, our lives as Americans, that's reflective of how we live. And so we just keep going. And they say that money can't buy happiness. And in essence, that's true. But there's sort of a subtext to that. Because the fact is, there are certain things that we need to be fulfilled. Food. We need food. I need food. Maybe you don't need food. I need food. Right? Water, shelter. There's a certain amount of money that brings that to us. When we feel safe and secure, we do feel happier. But that money caps out at a certain level. There's some debate where it's at, but there's a level where it caps out. And after that, for a while, your happiness goes like this, kind of, and after that, it flatlines. You make more money, you don't get any more happy. You make more money, you don't get any more happy. And then what happens is eventually you get to a level where making more money actually decreases your happiness. For a couple reasons. One is people that make a lot of money, they're not sure if people like them or they like the stuff that they give them. They like the money that they have. They start to distrust the people around them. They have a tough time keeping relationships. That there's a certain level of money where you start to worry, am I making enough? How do I make more? And we start to care more about it than we do about anything else. Listen, nothing wrong with money. Nothing wrong with having stuff. The problem is when stuff has you. And that's where we get. And we care so much about the pleasure that stuff brings us that we're addicted to it. Andy Stanley says in a talk that it's counterintuitive to what we think. But in reality, sometimes the way we raise our quality of life is to lower our standard of living. Because as we start to lower our standard of living, all of a sudden we have a little bit more money than we had before. We feel more at peace. We don't feel as anxious. We start to pay off our debts. The Bible tells us that when we're indebted to someone or something, we're enslaved to it. That's a stressful situation to be in. We think we're getting pleasure, but we're not. We're getting stressed. So the first thing we see, a lack of trust. We don't trust God as our source of joy, as our source of peace. We don't trust that God can actually help the situations around us. So we take matters and money into our own hands and do it for him. We desire pleasure, and we desire it more than anything else. So we spend as much as we have to get to a place that we feel like we're getting the pleasure we deserve. Last thing we do, we worship power, prestige, and position. Sometimes it's not the money itself, it's how the money makes us feel. It's what it means to us. It's the value that it gives us, that sort of feeling of prestige. This is why an athlete making millions upon millions upon millions of dollars will hold out for that extra $200K. Because it makes them feel prestigious. We think if we work hard enough, if we get to that certain level, we like the leverage that money gives us. And if we're not careful, we can become addicted to that. So we work harder up the ladder so we can make more money, so we can buy more stuff, and we've destroyed ourselves. We've destroyed the people around us. We've destroyed our marriages. We destroy our families because we just want that next promotion, because we just want to feel valuable. And it's never going to fix it. It's never going to take us to a place that it's enough. And we just keep putting it in, trying to fill that void. We don't trust that God can take care of it. We don't trust that he's going to take care of our family. We don't trust that he's going to take care of our children. We don't trust that he's going to take care of our spouse. We certainly don't trust that he's going to take care of us. So we try to fix it on our own. And we just want that next hit. We just need that newest gadget. We just want that other thing. And it's never enough. And we want the power and the prestige and the position that we feel with money. And what can happen is when we don't have enough of it, we can betray everything we care about to get just a little bit more. We're going to end today with communion. And communion is based around a meal. We always say it was on the night that Jesus was betrayed. Betrayed by Judas. Judas, who pretended to care about the poor, but actually stole money from the poor box. Judas, who didn't trust that God was going to take care of him, so he had to take care of himself. Judas, who eventually betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, some cash, and what it would bring to him. Judas, who said, I'll take the gold. Jesus, you take the cross. And as our ushers come forward, they're going to pass out these elements, a little piece of bread, a cup of juice. If you need gluten-free, we do have those in little cups as well. And as you hold on to them, and ask that you not take them once you get it, we're going to take them together, but as you hold on to them, I want you to think about the things in life, the stress that has been caused, especially financially. Where are the places that a lack of trust has caused you to go beyond your means? That you've lost your room to breathe, you've lost your margin. Where are the places in life that pursuing pleasure has become more important to you than pursuing God? And it's put you in a bind. Where are the places that working your way up the ladder, it's not the money, it's the value, it's the leverage that it gives you. It's causing you to lose your family, your spouse, your relationships. And know that it's only when we turn to a value system set up by Jesus that any of that can be fixed. When we find him as our source of joy and peace, love and significance, and we can turn away from those sorts of things. Do you reflect on that as you're holding the elements? We'll take them together here in a moment.